Well, sorry about the interruption
Here's another
there.
bedtime story for you all. Oh, it's about 7 years old now, and it's called They Say an Elephant Never Forgets. Now this story is about three brothers, one piece of wood with an old nail in it, an elephant, and how one good deed deserves another. The three brothers always played together, worked together, laughed and cried together. They lived miles from any big town and little village by a small river in India. The village was mainly built of mud huts, and the brothers' home was no different from any others. It had a doorway, but no door. It was only covered by a piece of old cloth. It didn't have a window, or should I say a hole in the wall, which let light in, and was covered, like the door, with a piece of old cloth. I'm sure you can see that they were not rich, and many days they would go without food because they could not buy any. Their mother and father had died many years ago, so the three brothers lived alone. People in the village always watched over them to make sure they were all right. Sometimes they would give them some food, but not very often, as they had very little enough for themselves. Everybody in the village liked the three brothers because they always had a smile on their faces, no matter what. So maybe I should introduce the three brothers to you. Excuse me. The oldest was called Fergus, while the middle brother was called Milo, and the youngest called Noah. Each of the brothers, although so alike, seemed to have a special interest or talent. Noah was a first-class fisherman, and whenever he went down to the river to fish, he always seemed to catch the biggest fish. Many a time the villagers would call on him to go fishing with them, as they knew that with Noah with them, they were sure to have a good catch of fish. Now Milo was not a brother who likes water. He never went anywhere near the river, and as for getting his feet wet, never in a month of Sundays. In fact, his dislike of water went as far as sometimes he would not wash for a week. It was only when his two other brothers got hold of him and howled him that he ever got washed. But for all his dislikes of water, Milo was very good at working the land. It seemed to have what they call green fingers. Whatever he planted in the ground always grew. What he did not know about plants was not worth knowing. The people in the village always asked Milo how they should plant their crops of rice and bananas. In fact, this was the only time he ever came near water, and that was to water his plants. The little garden around their mud hut always had some sort of food growing in it, although sometimes it was not ready to eat when they were hungry. So you see that although the brothers were very young, they were very much respected and liked by the people in the village. Oh, you want to know their ages as well? Well, you have to understand that the start of this story was a long time ago. But at the start, they were aged Noah 5, Milo 7, and the oldest brother Fergus was 9. I can hear you say, what's so special about Fergus? Well, it was that he was so very, very kind. Not only was he kind to people, but more so to animals. Should Fergus find a bird with a broken wing, he'd bring it back to the mud hut and feed it and nurse it till it got better. It wasn't just birds. It could be a dog or a cat, a goat or a sheep, even a snake from time to time. Whenever there was a sick animal in the village, the people would always bring them to Fergus for him to help to get the animal better. He always got very sad when an animal that he was looking after died, and often cried for many days. As you can see, everybody loved the three brothers. Now in the village was a sort of school, which from time to time they attended. Noah only wanted to learn more about fishing. Milo only asked to be able to read so he could learn about farming, and Fergus, well, just could not get enough knowledge. He wanted to be able to read and write. He wanted to be able to add up numbers. In fact, he wanted to know everything. One day the three brothers went out of the village to have some fun and games, to go exploring to places they had not gone to before. Milo had packed some rice and bananas from the garden. Noah had cooked after he'd caught the fish, and Fergus said he had nothing to bring, so he would carry the bags. So they set off on this adventure that was to change not only their lives, but many other people's lives as well. Not that they knew that then, and in fact would not know it for many, many years to come, but more about that later. Oh, excuse me again. Over the many years they had played in most areas around the village, but today, and they planned to stay out all night as well, they were going to the other side of the river into the jungle. People had told them many times that they should never go into the jungle, but they thought they knew better, and this was where they were going. They slipped out of their mud hut before it was light, hoping that nobody would see them and ask them where they were going. They did not want to tell anybody any lies. Luck was with them, and they left the village long before the sun came up. It was only then that Milo realised that they would have to cross the river. Wet water? Ah! He started to panic, but Fergus said to him he'd carry him across the river so he would not get wet. Noah laughed and walked into the river and called Milo a scary. Fergus told Noah to be quiet, as he was not helping. He told Milo to climb on his back and started to enter the river. Milo let out a loud scream and said what would happen if Fergus slipped and let go of him. Well, by the time Fergus replied with the answer that he would get wet, it was too late to get off, so they were now halfway across the river. It was just as easy to continue as it was to go back. So Milo said, all right, let's get this over with. So Fergus carried on walking through the river to the other side, and just before they reached the far bank, he started to slip on the mud. Quick as a flash, Noah raced in beside his brother and grabbed hold of his arm and stopped him from falling. They then walked up the bank to the dry land and fell onto the ground, all three of them laughing. Once they'd got their breath back from laughing and carrying, they carried on their way into the jungle. They walked many miles, and then the bushes and the trees started to get bigger and thicker. It was also so very dark in the jungle. Each of the three brothers was scared, but would not admit it to the others, so they went deeper and deeper. They had taken many hours to walk here, and as it was getting dark, they thought it would be a good idea to find somewhere to sleep for the night. They walked on and at last came upon a small clearing amongst the trees, and all agreed that this was where they would sleep. They could hear various noises from the jungle, but they did not worry them, and they always hear strange noises in the village in any case. Of course, they were hungry, so Fergus unpacked the bag and shared out the rice, fish and bananas. Suddenly, Milo looked up and said, we have nothing to drink, no water. Both Noah and Fergus said at the same time, but we didn't think you liked water. Milo did not think this was at all funny, as he was thirsty, and fell on top of both Fergus and Noah, playfully pulling on their arms in a friendly fight. It didn't take them long to stop playing, and when they did, Fergus reached into the bag he'd been carrying and pulled out a large plastic bottle of water. They all laughed and sat there eating their rice and bananas. As it was now getting very dark, they decided that it was time to go to sleep, and within a few minutes each of the brothers was sound asleep. Although they did not know it, they'd been very tired and asleep. During the night many animals came into the clearing while they slept. There were a couple of monkeys, who ate the little bits of banana on the floor, and at one time a large snake slid by, but was more concerned to be getting back to its hole in the ground than wondering who these people were. 5 young deer walked into the clearing to eat up the fallen grains of rice on the jungle floor before moving on. Nothing disturbed the brothers. They slept soundly all night. Now I want you to put yourself in their place. Picture in your mind that you are now sound asleep in a jungle, a place you had never been before and had been told never to go there by many, many people. Suddenly, in your dreams, you hear a terrible noise. You move to the other side and try to snuggle back to sleep again. The noise comes again, this time louder, and you sit up and look around. The first thing you notice is that your 2 brothers are also sitting up. You think, well, it can't be a dream. It must be as real as those terrible noises I can hear, where they're coming from. You look around. Nothing seems to be there, only the trees and the jungle. You look up and see that the sun has come up. It's daylight. The noise comes again, and you hold hands and feel very, very scared. Now what do you do? Well, you could run, but where to? You could just stay where you are and hope that whatever is making the noise will go away. Or you could follow the noise and find out what it is. You talk amongst yourselves and decide that the only thing to do is to go and find out where the noise is coming from. So the 3 brothers got up and started to walk towards the terrible noise. Noah said he'd never heard a noise like that before, except when Milo was forced to have a wash. Milo gave him a dirty look. He had not washed for a week. Fergus said it sounded like some animal in great pain, as they had heard animals make similar noise when they hurt themselves. The noise was coming from deeper in the jungle, and they worried that they would ever be able to find their way out again. The noise came again, much louder, so they knew they were getting close to whatever was making the noise. Fergus went on in front, with Milo on behind and Noah at the back. Fergus told them to be very quiet, whatever they found or whatever happened, to stay still and do not run away. He explained if they ran away, should it be a wild animal, it would chase after them and maybe kill them. This news did not bring a smile to either Milo or Noah's face, but they both knew that if it was an animal and it was hurt, Fergus would know what to do. They walked on through the jungle until they came into a small clearing, much smaller than the one they had slept in. In the clearing were the remains of an old wooden house. Not much of it was still standing, most of the wood having rotted away and fallen on the jungle floor. They stood just outside the clearing looking around, but they could see nothing that had made the terrible noise. Their faces told their own story. They all felt relieved that whatever was making the noise had gone away. Suddenly the noise came again, and again, much louder, and it was coming from behind that was what was left of the wooden building. The three brothers knew there was no going back. They had to find out what was making the noise, so they very slowly walked across the clearing and looked around the wooden wall to see what was there. I'm sure you cannot guess what they saw. Go on, try. Wow. The answer's in the heading of the story, isn't it? All right, I will tell you. What they saw was a baby elephant. The baby elephant was laying on its side, with one of its legs held tightly to the side of the old wooden house. At first they thought it had been caught in a trap, but on looking again they realised that his leg was being held against the wall with a long old rusty nail. The baby elephant had most probably walked into the clearing in the dark and leant against the wall, maybe to scratch his leg. Then he got caught on the nail, and each time he tried to move, the nail dug deeper into his leg, and as this happened he cried out in pain. What were they to do? The elephant, though only a baby, if it put its mind to it, could kill all three of them, pick them up with his long trunk and smash them to the floor before treading on them. So the three brothers, Fergus, Milo and Noah, made a joint decision that was to change all of their lives. Fergus was the first to walk around the wall, and very slowly, and talking in a soft, kind voice, approached the baby elephant. The elephant saw him and started to try to get up, but again the nail dug in even deeper into his leg. So he just lay back down and watched as Fergus and his two brothers came closer. He'd never seen people before, and maybe wondered what and who they were, but was in so much pain he just did nothing. Fergus took out the water bottle from his bag and slowly dropped a few drops of water into the elephant's mouth. The elephant seemed to relax, and Fergus poured some more water into his mouth. Milo had not eaten all his bananas from the night before, and offered one to the elephant, which he took very quickly and ate it. No, he said, he thought the elephant smiled. Fergus stroked the elephant's head and trunk, and continued to walk softly to him. Now he knew that animals did not understand what he said, but had learnt a long time ago that if you spoke softly to a sick animal, it trusted you. Milo and Noah had now sat down in front of the elephant, which was very brave of them, as both of them never been this close to an elephant before, and smiled at him. Mind you, neither had Fergus, but he had no worry about this or his brother's safety. He knew that the animal was trusting them all to help him. Fergus reached down to the elephant's legs and looked at the rusty old nail that was poking out from the wall. The wooden plank it was in was loose, and after a few minutes he had pulled the wood away from the wall. The movement had caused the elephant some pain, but he just lay there while the wood was removed. Once he was free from the old wooden wall, he tried to stand up, and with a few wobbly starts at last stood on three good legs. It was only now that the brothers realised just how big a baby elephant was, as he towered way above them. Milo and Fergus started to back away, and were soon out of the clearing and standing under the safety of the trees. Fergus knew that his task had only just started. The worst bit was still to come. He walked around to the front of the elephant and looked into his eyes, stroked his long trunk, and started to speak softly to him, telling him that he was now what he was going to do, and that it really might hurt. The elephant waved his trunk into the air and almost seemed to nod his head, as if he understood what had just been said to him. Not thinking of his own safety, Fergus bent under the baby elephant, grabbed hold of the piece of wood with both hands, and pulled with all his might. Oh, the elephant raised his trunk into the air and made a terrible noise. He was in great pain. But he never moved his legs, but just stood as still as he could while Fergus pulled on the wood and the nail. Slowly, very slowly, the nail started to come away from the elephant's leg, until it came out so fast that Fergus fell over onto his back underneath the elephant's tummy. The elephant looked down to where Fergus laid, and with great care moved each of his legs so that he did not step on him. This time the noise coming from his trunk did not sound like a painful sound, but one of thanks. He raised his trunk again, nodded his head from side to side, and without another sound walked, with a bit of a limp, out of the clearing and back into the jungle. It took a few minutes for the three brothers to gather their wits, as they say, and without a word being said between them, they likewise walked back into the jungle, and after a few wrong turns, found themselves back on the river bank. It was fast getting dark, so Fergus carried Noah across the river, while Noah followed on behind. They had not spoken a word to each other on the journey back until they got back inside the little mud hut. They all agreed they would tell nobody about what had happened, or they were sure they would get into trouble. They climbed into their own little beds, happy to be back safely, and slept till late the next morning. You know, they never ever did tell anybody about what had happened until one very special day when they told me. And if you like, I will tell you what happened next to Fergus, Milo and Noah. Should you wish to know what happened next? Well, listen to part 2.